Last week we witnessed the biblical love at first sight story of Jacob meeting Rachel. Heroically, Jacob rolls the massive stone from atop the well to water her flock. Romantically, he kisses her and then lifts up his voice in weeping. Though this is love at first sight, its consummation is vastly delayed. Jacob has to work 7 years for his deceptive uncle Laban before he is able to finally marry Rachel. A strenuous exercise in delayed gratification. And yet, their love is so great that the text tells us that the 7 years were but a few days for Jacob. Because of this morphing of time, he was able to easily withstand the waiting period. And his commitment becomes a model for a love that transcends time. Indeed, this sense of time transcendence takes us back to the moment of Jacob's weeping at the well. For the Midrash shares that Jacob wept because he saw with prophetic foreknowledge that he and Rachel would not be buried together. In this week's parsha, we see his premonition fulfilled. Rachel tragically dies in childbirth and is buried along the road to Ephrat, as opposed to in the family burial site. At that moment of the kiss, the bonds of time were transcended, and he was able to have a prophetic vision of the future. Granted, it was a painful vision, but it's not unlike the story of Rabbi Akiva, who laughed when he beheld the tragic destruction of the Second Temple. He laughed because he realized that if the negative prophecy of destruction came true, then that would necessarily mean that all the positive prophecies of return and rebuilding would also come true for the Jewish people. Indeed, we in our own days have had the enormous gift of witnessing the fulfillment, partial though it may be, of the myriad prophecies of return to the land of Israel. We are the living recipients of that prophetic fruit. In the poem below, Rachel weeps for the fulfillment of the prophecy of her children's return to this land. She reminds us that just as Jacob's love for her transcended time and allowed him to make it through those 7 years of work, so too, if we, beleaguered builders of Jerusalem, can but access the vastness of our love for this land, then we can also weather through whatever waiting periods time may hold. May we merit to witness the fulfillment of a true and enduring peace in this land. This poem is called The Wait. You wept as wet as wells, having spilled the crowning ton of stone onto the sand, with withered hands but high romance. May the skinny shepherds call the place the Wailing Well for generations to come. And 7 years grown old between your gaze and mine was like a day, held between the gates of withered hands and weathered wait. And know that I weep as well when memories of the future spill into our tent, and premonitions limp into our lamp-lit den. For if this ominous prophecy must be, then promise me to plant your stones on that baneful road where house my bones, and let memorials stand, a somber marker in a severed land, to mark the promise of prophecy, of transcendence of time and of distance, with a mother's mad insistence that the exile of her children must end. And when finally march our children by from their battered walk through genocide, I will be weeping loud with pleading at that corner side, where Jerusalem meets Gush Etzion with her border guards and building zones. And I will lament with rage the historic parade through Europe, Arabia, Auschwitz, Assyria, and back to my grave at Bethlehem's barricades. And with the force of my weeping and the form of your rocks will our children return to the road to Ephrat, and 1900 years will be like a day held between the gates of withered hands, and our children's will to weather the wait.